Cheers, guys, and welcome to Uncle Scott's Pancast podcast. In this episode of the Pancast, we are going to talk Dutch ovens. We're going to check in on some Smithey cast iron. Got an update on the Yaxell knife. Did some cutting with this guy. Got a brand new kitchen knife to unbox, cast of thousands, and more. Let's jump in and get started. First up, want to give a War Eagle and shout out to my Auburn Tigers, #1 in men's basketball this week. They've been there for a couple of weeks. Got a really solid team this year. Bruce Pearl, you got to like Bruce Pearl, and hopefully this will continue through the tournament. Who knows? Our football team, we don't need to mention them. Let's start out the actual Pancast here with egg prices. They've been through the roof. People talk about hyperinflation, food inflation, egg prices just skyrocketing some places. Here in Salt Lake City, the last 2 times my wife has been to Costco, and we'll do a little big box battle here. They have been out of eggs, so no eggs at the local Costco. I don't know how it is where you are. I went to the Walmart neighborhood grocery, the closest one to our house, and they actually had a pretty good stock of eggs in there. And as for prices, local prices here, Eggland's Best, the cage-free, so kind of a little bit snootier than your average egg, less than $6.50 for a dozen of the Eggland's Best, and they seem to have pretty good supply of the other eggs. What are you guys seeing where you are? Do you have eggs? What are you paying for them? Are they through the roof or not? Also, a little food funny, while I was at Walmart, I was also shopping for some toothpaste, and I ran across this. This is the Optic White with charcoal. Charcoal in whitening toothpaste. Now, having cleaned a Weber charcoal grill or two in my time, I don't think of charcoal as something you think of in a whitening toothpaste. And I guess the Optic White Road Tar edition is going to come out at some point too. Also along those lines, on the big box battle, I've got both the Sam's and the Costco executive credit cards. I noticed that Sam's always has 5% rebate on gas. I noticed that Costco, theirs was 4. They've now matched that. So on their own gas, Costco is now up to 5. And I like competition because it's good for us consumers. Now let's talk about the Yaxell. I unboxed this guy in a previous Pancast. Recently I made some ribollita, and that is a good excuse to do a lot of cutting and slicing and chopping. We've had the winter blast, and paid for a package of ski lessons for my son up at Park City. Took him up there 2 Saturdays ago. It was a balmy 2 degrees Fahrenheit at the bottom, and I don't care how cold it is, put on an extra pair of long underwear. We had already paid for these lessons, and you're going there, buddy. But when it is a winter blast outside, that is a good excuse to be inside and make some kind of heartier dishes, your soups, your stews, your popozos, etc., etc. I use the occasion to make some ribollita. If you've never made ribollita before, I highly encourage it, and I got a link to a kind of a real deal recipe that I'll put below. It's an Italian vegetable soup. It's just absolutely full of good stuff like kale, cabbage, potatoes, carrots, onions, potatoes, etc., etc. But it was a good excuse to get the old Yaxell out. And I unboxed this guy and did the tomato test in a previous Pancast. When you make ribollita, you do a lot of slicing and cutting and chopping. And I have to say, my first big in-depth cook with the Yaxell, I was pretty impressed with it. Now, I spent a couple of years over in Italy, and ribollita was an absolute staple of my diet. If you've never tried it, you've got to make some. Absolutely chock full of healthy vegetables. And if you're ever in Italy and want a relatively low-cost lunch, if you can find a little mom and pop place, get the bowl of ribollita and the old mezzo litro di Chianti della Casa, and you've got an $8, $10 euro meal that is absolutely filling and full of good stuff. And it was one of those dishes where it was kind of inspirational to me, because when I got back to America, I wanted some ribollita. Nobody even knew what it was, and I had to learn to make it for myself. And if I can do it, you can do it too. Let's see, I've been making a bunch of cornbread in this Smithey, and I thought we'd touch on that real quick. First thing is, this is how the Smithey started out, kind of brownish, bronzish. And here is how it's going. It's really darkened in and almost black in certain places. So that seasoning is coming in. I haven't done anything fancy to the seasoning, just cooking. And I really think making cornbread in a cast iron skillet may be one of the best things you can do for your actual seasoning. Now, the key to a nice crust on a cornbread like this is not only a nice heavy cast iron like a Smithey, it's also having a lot of fat. And people get on me. I use a lot of Crisco. I know it's a seed oil. I don't care when it comes to cornbread. But the way you get a crunchy crust on the cornbread is to heat a big, thick, heavy cast iron like this Smithey for 25-30 minutes or so at 450. The pan will just be screaming hot. You add your Crisco, let it melt, let it heat for a minute or two. Then you take that hot fat and pour it into your batter, stir it up. There's still a bunch of fat left in the pan. You pour in that cornbread batter, you will hear it sizzle, and that's what makes that delicious brown, crunchy cornbread crust. What I've started doing is just wiping the excess oil out after I turn out the cornbread, put the Smithey back in the oven and let it go another 30 minutes. And it seems to really help the seasoning. So I'm going to call that the cornbread seasoning method for cast iron. Let's talk about Dutch ovens. Klimp 5615 wanting some advice on Dutch oven sizes. Kind of interesting here. She says she's going to be doing some cooking just for herself and her husband, so she wants a smaller size, but also says she wants 2 of them so she can make recipes side by side. So I guess she makes 2 batches and they eat one and they take another one and they freeze it and eat it later. So she wants a little bit smaller size. For 1 to 2 people, I think something in the 5.5 quart size is a good all-around size to go with. She said she's going to be making soups and stews and sometimes some breads. So I think with the 5.5, you could make some artisan bread in one of these. You could probably also get by with a 4, but I think the 4 would be just a little bit cramped, especially making some of the maybe recipes from a cookbook. They're usually for a little bit bigger sizes. I think the 5's a good way to go. And here I thought we might start a new there's going to be some wiggle room, and it's not exact, but maybe a Dutch oven size scale we can use to kind of estimate Dutch oven sizes. And I'm going to use kind of weeknight supermarket chili as the measuring stick. So a pound of ground beef, an onion, a can of tomatoes, a can of beans, and the supermarket packet of chili seasoning. Let's kind of call that one batch. I think in the 4 and the 5.5, you can do one batch of that weeknight supermarket chili. Once you get up to, say, a 7 or so, you can do a batch and a half, so a pound and a half of ground beef. You could brown in one of those fairly easily without getting too crowded. At the 9 quart size, you can do 2 pounds. So 2 batches of supermarket chili in a 9 quart, and that beef browns pretty nicely. And then once you get up to like the 13 quart or so, you can actually do 4 batches at once. So 4 pounds of ground beef you can brown in a 13 quart Dutch oven. Just kind of a little easy rule of thumb and a good way to think about it if you're shopping around for Dutch ovens. A little bit more on Dutch ovens. Let's see What We Do channel wrote in and said, enjoyed watching the videos and talking about Le Creuset versus Staub. Says they are definitely Le Creuset people, but wouldn't disassociate themselves with a Stauber. So those of us who like Staubs, I guess we are Staubers. What do we call the Le Creuset people? Crueseters? I don't know. While we're talking Dutch ovens here, I made a recipe from the Staub cookbook for a roast chicken. I always compare my results to the ones in the cookbook. And here we go with the Staub version. And here's my version. I thought mine turned out pretty decently, but what did they use on their bird? Is that brown paint? How in the world do you get such even browning like that? Good heavens. Let's see, Stevie Simmons 13579 wrote in kind of complaining about the amount of butter I use. He says, for those who don't want a heart attack at 50, including pro chefs who don't have time for all this nonsense, just use a non-stick pan. He's talking about the amount of butter that I use. I think pro chefs, I think we would be stunned how much butter is used in a professional kitchen. They probably don't want us to know, but I think it's probably a lot more than you see me use in my videos. Let's see, Lauren Antonia 1 wrote in talking about a debouille pan she bought. She bought the Country frying pan with 2 handles. Says she's been wanting it, but not sure what for. I am in this camp myself. I will occasionally see a pan or a piece of cookware or a knife, and I just want it, and I don't have any reason to get it, and I don't know what I want it for, but I go ahead and buy it anyway, and then I come up with something to cook in it. So guilty on that myself. Let's see, FD4340 wrote in and says, I always find no matter which pan I cook on, it takes my meat longer to cook than what YouTubers say. And if I increase the heat a bit, the meat will burn. And I'm probably guilty of this myself, but when people cook on YouTube or other platforms, a lot of times we leave ourselves some wiggle room, especially when, say, for example, in the case of a steak, I might say I go 2 to 3 minutes per side. There's actually a fair amount of difference between 2 minutes and 3 minutes. And there are a lot of factors. What pan are you using? How thick is it? What burner are you using? What temperature did you preheat it to? How high are you cooking it? Are you going to take it to the oven? There is always some wiggle room and some variability. What temperature was the meat? Was it right out of the fridge? Had it been out? Had it come up to room temperature? Etc., etc., etc. If you're having trouble with the meat burning, if you turn the heat up, what I would do is just leave the heat exactly where it is and just let it go longer. And especially in the case of red meat, you may have to adjust for how you like your meat done. For example, I cooked some burgers at 350 on that Breville Control Freak. And 350, you think, well, that's not very high for red meat. It actually produces a good Maillard reaction. The burgers release and get those flipped over, and you can see a nice crust on those burgers there. I think at the lower temperature, you may have to cook them a little bit longer. It's very good for people who like their burgers, and I'm one of them, who like their burgers completely well done. Now, I eat my steaks medium rare. The burgers I like well done. If you go at a higher temperature, you can get that meat done quicker on the outside. It's going to be a little bit more rare or pink in the middle. And that's the way some people like their burgers too. So it just depends, and you may just have to practice a time or two till you get the heat dialed in and your food cooking exactly like you like it. Let's see, I did a video in that Learning to Cook with Carbon Steel series on frying some okra, and somebody noticed that there was a mark in the pan I was using. And Melanie Matson, 3733, wrote in and said, what is that crescent-shaped mark in the skillet from? Visit Cart also wrote in and said, she loves the smile on my pan. Where did that smile, where did that mark come from? Where do marks on pans come from around this household? I can't prove this, but I think my wife had something to do with this. Now around here, I've got cookware everywhere, and my wife, she is more than welcome to use almost any of my cookware. Occasionally there are some problems. For example, we had that popcorn fiasco where some popcorn got burnt, and it took me days of scrubbing to return a pan to usable condition. Things like that occasionally happen. I've got certain cookware, for example, some of my tin-lined Real Deal, very expensive coppers, and I have to say, unfortunately, those are hands-off. You can't cook with these. But for this Learning to Cook in Carbon Steel series, I specifically pointed out this one carbon steel pan. I'm trying to use it throughout the series, and I said, don't cook in this pan. Just leave it alone. I'm using it for a video series. Let's leave this one be. Came in to make that fried okra video, and someone had stuck something in that pan, and it left, I don't know if it was wet or what, but it left a crescent-shaped mark in the one pan I said, do not touch this pan. I'm using it for a special video. Now, I don't have security cameras in the kitchen and I can't prove it, and I'm not sure who set what in there, and there were some other people around as well. But without pointing fingers, I think it was my wife put something in the pan and marked it up. And there are probably 45 other carbon steel skillets around here, and the one I said not to touch was the one that got the mark. So not to wade too far out into politics, but I know RFK Jr. is coming up for his confirmation hearings, and I just find it interesting. I want healthy food here in America, so I see no reason our food shouldn't be as healthy as any food over in Europe. And I hope if he can get confirmed, he will do something about our food quality here. But I just find it interesting, and I don't want to get too far out into politics, but what if the Democrats had allowed RFK to debate Biden and had an actual primary? There's a good chance he would have beaten Biden, and probably a decent chance he would have beaten Trump. There's a decent chance he would be president right now, and all the people trashing him in these Senate confirmation hearings would be supporting him, and the Republicans will be the ones trashing him. So I just find it crazy the way the winds blow in politics, and the way someone is a hero one day and a goat the next. And I hope at some point we get good, healthy food here in America too. So I got a new knife. Let's take a look at this guy. Unbox this guy here in real time. Excuse me. All right, and what this should be is a Wusthof Classic Ikon 6-inch prep knife. And I've got the 8-inch Wusthof Classic Ikon chef's knife. And I've been very happy with it. And I wanted to add to my prep knife lineup because I've got a couple of good prep knives. I got a Kramer and this Enzo, and these are nice. I also, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, I got a bunch of these old KitchenAid steak knives that I end up using as prep knives, and they're just absolutely terrible for what I'm using them for. So I really wanted to get a better prep knife here. In the Wusthofs, I've had good luck with my Classic Ikon. They make the regular Classic, has a little bit different handle. The Classic Ikon has a little bit more of a shaped handle to it, which I find that fits in my hand pretty well. Careful opening this guy. As always, the tip protector has come off during shipping, so you gotta be careful when you open a knife. There it is, the Classic Ikon prep knife. Let's turn it here so we can see. Here's the 8-inch chef's knife, the 6-inch prep knife. Okay, gave this guy a quick wash, manufacturing residue off. Let's do the old internet tomato test here. Woo! All right, are we ready? I get my tomato to stick. I think it's going pretty well. So pushing the tomato ever so slightly, but I think pretty sharp. Pretty nice. So the Wusthof Classic Ikon 6-inch prep knife. be doing some more slicing and chopping and cutting with this guy and let you know what I think about it down the road. Well, that wraps her up for this episode. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time on Uncle Scott's Pancast podcast.